Welcome back to your next lesson of part of the course, working with the Linux Bash shell. In this lesson, we're going to be taking a look at some file manipulation commands. And let's go ahead and get started. If you haven't already, fire up your server as always. Log into your home user directory, and we're going to create some files in here. So I'm just going to start over from where you're at, and we're just going to do a touch test. Let's do a touch test 1. Now what this is doing is this is just creating a blank file for us. Let's do this several times. We'll do touch test 3, touch test 4. I'll let you catch up, and you can see what happened is it has created 5 files for us: test 1, test 2, test 3, test 4. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we can delete all of those files, or all the files with the name test in them, with this simple command, and it's real easy. All we have to do is we're going to use the ls. There's different ways of doing this, but we're going to use the ls. Now the great thing about Linux is we're able to combine commands as we want. It's pretty flexible in the amount of commands you want to combine. So we're going to use ls here. So ls just lists the directory contents, and then we're going to use our redirect, or our pipe, and then we're going to do grep test, because we want to list all of the contents in the directory that have test behind them. Okay, so if we do this part, we see that 5 of them have been listed, and now what we need to do is we're going to use a command. Now this is the command you need to learn here. It's called xargs, and what this is going to do is it performs a command for each file that we list. So we'll do ls grep test, and then we need to pipe it another command. So we pipe it xargs rm. So what we're doing is we're listing all the contents. And when we list the contents, we want to send it through the program grep. Once we send it through the program, we want to say list only test. And then after we've done that, we want to pass it the xargs. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy this, because what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the xargs command. And it's a build and execute command lines from standard input. So you can read all of this description, but what we're going to do is, now that we have our command, every time for every file that's listed here, for every test, xargs is going to pass it an rm command. We're basically placing rm in front of each one of these files as they're listed. Now what we know is that rm removes files. So if I perform this command to do an ls, our directory is now empty. We have effectively removed every file in there. Now we can pass in any command we want. We can pass it a touch command, we can pass it a copy command, we can pass it an echo command. It's basically just how you want or need to use the command when you need it. But that was an example of how you remove all files labeled test inside of a directory using the xargs command. And that's a great command to remember. So just kind of practice with that, use your CP, maybe echo some stuff to it, and keep that in your arsenal. It's good to know and good to remember. So next what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the cat command. Now a lot of times the cat command is actually used to view the contents of a file. Well, let's go over, let's create a file. So we'll do vi test. We're going to insert and say this is my file. How are you? I like pizza, lots of pizza. So we have our file here that has contents in it. I'm going to hit escape, then :wq, and we have our file. And if we cat test, what it does is it displays the contents of the file. But that's actually not the purpose of cat. If we main cat, what it's supposed to do is concatenate files and print on the standard output. Well, the standard output is our shell here. This is our standard output from the terminal. And so what we can do is we can type, well, let's see here. How do we want to do this? Let's create another file. We'll call it test2. And let's go ahead and I for insert. This is my test2 file. Test2 also likes pizza. Test2 likes lots of pizza. We'll escape WQ for saving. Let's cat test1 and test2 together. And let's get the right files associated. It's cat test and test2. That all of the contents of each file are concatenated together. We have the first file, which is then concatenated with the second file. And so that's what cat does it concatenates it to the standard output. Let's say we wanted to combine these two files and put them in a separate file. Maybe we want to store that information, or we want to email that information. We just want to put in a separate file. So I would just say cat test. I want to combine or concatenate the test file, the test2 file. I want to redirect that into test1.txt. Okay, now remember I used the double redirect there, which means if test1.txt exists, it will append this information onto the file. If it doesn't, it will create it. If we were to use the single, then it would just overwrite the existing file. So that's an important thing that we always need to remember when we're using our redirects. So now let's take a look at test1.txt. So I'll do less test1.txt, and now we have the concatenated results inside of the test1.txt file. So that's a pretty slick command. Let's hit Q to quit. And remember, less is our file page viewer, so we use that to view files many times. And you can use cat to do it, but we're using the correct commands, so that kind of gets drilled in your head if you're working on a certification, if you're wanting to really become good at Linux, and if you're looking for a Linux job. We want to try to use the correct commands going forward, if you haven't already. So next we can do is we can take a look at joining files. Okay, so what join does is it joins lines of two files on a common field. So let's man join. This is the command we're going to look at. Like I said, join lines of two files on a common field. So let's join test and test2. Well, that's correct. So what it says, join file 2 is not in sorted order. So we can sort test2, and now we have test2 sorted. So let's say we want to sort test2 into test2.txt. We need to pipe that, and we can join test and test2.txt. File 1 is not in sort order, so let's go ahead and sort our file 1 too. We're going to sort test into test1.txt. And I think let's try this again. I think we just overwrote everything. So let's remove all the files inside of here, our directory called test. So we're just going to say ls, we're going to pipe the grep, excuse me. We're going to pipe test, and then we're just going to pass xargsrm. And that removes all our files in there, so we can actually start over. Now there's other ways of doing that. You can do rm star, but hey, we're trying to practice some of the commands that we're learning here and get those drilled in your head. So let's go ahead and try this again. Let's create a new file. So we'll create vi test. Let's insert blah. Let's save and exit. Escape, save and exit. Vi test1. And we'll insert blah again. Escape, WQ to exit. And now let's join test and test1. And we see that it's joined on the field blah because blah is the common field in both of them. So let's go ahead and vi test1. And let's append onto this file. Blah, how are you today? Escape, WQ, and we'll do join test, test1. So what it's doing here, since blah is the common field in there, we're looking at the first field, and that's the common field, it's joining on that one field. So let's vi test. Let's edit this. Blah, I'm fine. Escape, WQ. Join test and test1. And what's happening is it's joining on that specific one. We have that join command, and it's just joining on that specific file there, on that, not the file, but onto the field itself. Common fields. And you can use -i to ignore case. You can specify the field on which fields you want it to join by using -1 for field 1, or -2 for field 2, or -3 for field 3, and so on and so forth. We can look at the main command one more time, man join. And there's just different ways inside of here. No, I go to the man because I want you to get inside. Well, there's only two, fields that you can join on. one for each file. And I go in here because that's a great habit. There's no way to teach you everything. I'm trying to teach you the basics and the most popular and the most important items, but as you can tell, there's many different flags you can do for each individual command. And so that's why I'm trying to teach you the man command for the manual. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Now we have paste. We can man paste. And what that does is it merges lines of files. And so we read here, write lines consisting of the sequentially corresponding lines from each file, separated by tabs to standard output, with no file or when the file is dash, read standard input. So let's try paste test, and it pastes that in there. So next what we can do is paste test and test1. And we're now merging the files, or the line of the file. So we're merging line 1 with line 1 of the other file. We know that line 2 of the first file is this colon that we left on there, but there is no line 2 for the other one. So what it's doing is it's basically doing a comparison line by line of your two individual files. So let's mess this up a little bit. Let's go to VI test. Let's hit O to insert on the second line. This is the second line. Let's go down 4. This is the fourth. Well, it's actually our third. And let's save and exit. We could say paste test, test1. And it skips these additional lines down here. And here's our third outputted sentence that we have created. So we're combining on the two. We're combining the two files, and we see that the colon existed in test1, and the this is my second line existed in test. And so our lines have, or our files, or our standard output have been pasted together based off line number into the standard output. Now again, you can always use the redirect on this command and paste the contents of this inside of a different file, paste test, test1, into blah.txt, and let's less blah. And there you go, there's the contents of that output. And remember, you can use the tab to finish what you started typing. So if you wonder how I can finish that so complete, we just use a tab and it finishes it for us. I can use the Control X backspace to go back to our blank line. Now you can use odd, man OD, to put your, or dump your files in Octal and other formats. I'm not going to go into many details on this. It's just important to know that you can use this to dump your files into a separate format. It's probably in more advanced lessons that we'll go down later. So the next item we have is sort. And what sort does is it allows us by default, the sort command uses the first field. You can use the -K option separated by commas to change what field it sorts in. What does this mean? Well, let's sort blah.txt. And now what we have is it's sorted by what it thinks is the proper order. So let's do a vi sort.txt. Let's I for insert. So we'll have 1, 2, 3, 6, 8, 9. Is this going to do what we think it's going to do? Let's man sort to find out. Sort lines of text with files. Write sorted concatenation of all files to standard output. So we have different flags here we can look at. We can sort by month. Numeric sort, compare according to string numerical values. We have a random sort. Let's see what the default's going to do for us. So we'll do sort.txt. 1, 2, 3, 6, 8, 9. And that's actually the order we put it in, vi sort.txt, or not the order we put it in. Actually, it is the order we put it in. Let's mess it up here a little bit. 3 and 0. I'm going to use my up arrow to resort it. And what it did is it resorted it for us in the proper format. My 3 and 0 were in the end of the file, and now it's in the right sort order when we do it to standard output. 0, 1, 2, 3, 3, 6. And we see that we got rid of the 9 out of there. So we are in good shape. And the sort allows us to sort in alphabetical order, numerical order, and it has its own default. So sort is a great tool for us. And remember, we can combine many different commands. We can combine sort command with the paste command by using the pipe. And the pipe allows us to send the output of one through another program, from one program to another, in order to manipulate or get the results that we're looking for long term. Okay, next one is split. Now let's see which file we want to work with. So let's take a look. Less blah. Now you don't have to do this. I'm looking at see which file has the best contents for us to work with. Well, what split does is it splits the results based off lines. So let's say let's create a new file. Split.txt. And let's insert this is a line. I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to hit YY because that yanks the line or copies it. Then I'm going to hit 10, 10P, and it pastes my copied text or my yanked text on the next 10 lines. I'm going to hit escape, WQ to save. And now let's take a look at split. Well, what split does is I can say split -L and then a number. So we can say 2. So for every 2 lines, yank that contents and place it into a new file. So I want to do that on the sort.txt file, and I want the naming convention to be sort or my sort. Then we're going to do an ls to list contents, and what we see here is my sort A, my sort AB, my sort AC. Well, what's that? Well, what we know is that it's yanking every 2 lines, so we can take a look at, we're just going to do a cat my sort A. And here's 2 lines, okay, cat, my sort AB. And there's the 3 and 6 lines. Now if we take a look at these, my sort AB, or AA, what it does is it took those lines, let's do a man sort for us, and it sorts, or not sort, we're doing the wrong command here. We're looking at sort. So what we need to do is we split it. So we're going to do man split. And it splits a file into pieces. And the output is fixed size pieces of input to prefix A, prefix AB. That's why we have multiple files. So we can take a look at our file, and we have 3 and 6. Now what we did is, remember, we kind of sorted the wrong file here. So what we should do, we didn't sort, we split the wrong file. So we need to split -L every 2 lines. We want to split.txt and go, let's name it user. And so what we have is user AB, user AD, user AF, user AA. So now we have these individual files, and if we take a look at our user AA file, these are the first 2 lines, and the user AD file will be line 3 and 4. So we can cat user AD. Or actually that would be 6 and 8 probably. Cat user AB would be line 3 and 4. But what you see is every 2 lines of our split file, for every 2 lines it took this and put it into file. Let's edit this so you can kind of see what it did. Is it put it into my user AA, user AB. This is actually AA. This is user AB, user AB. So what it did for every 2 lines, because we gave it the -L, 2 lines, it put it in the user -A, because we named the file user, and it automatically does this so we know for naming convention. And then the other 2 lines, it went to AB. The 2 lines after that, it went to AC, AD, and so on and so forth. So I hope I explained that properly. It's a really easy concept that's hard to communicate verbally for some reason. So that's how you use split. We went over sort, we went over OD. The expand command allows you to convert tabs to spaces. The unexpand allows you to convert spaces to tabs. So we don't really need to look at that. Those are just 2 commands you can take a look at. These are in your course notes. We looked at join, we looked at the XARGS program, and now let's take a look at TR. And what TR does, it allows us to translate or delete characters from standard input writing to standard output. What on earth does that mean? So let's take a look at a file. Let's go ahead and just remove everything inside of the user directory. So we're going to say rm, well, let's just remove the entire user directory. So rm-r user. It's going to make us do it recursively. There's a command for us to get around that, but we're going to actually just go ahead and use a file instead. So we're inside of our user, and let's take a look at blah.txt. So this has a few lines in here for us. I'm going to delete these blank lines by doing dd, dd, and dd. I'm going to save it, wq, and then I'm going to use tr. And so what we'll do is we'll just say, well, first let's take a look at cat blah.txt. Now you see the word blah 2 times here. What I'm going to use is I'm going to use translate tr to change the word blah to the word test for this. So we'll do tr blah, that is a file we want to change, blah to test from the blah.txt. Now what we do here, we translated the word blah on this sentence here to the word test using the input, standard input. Now remember, this is standard input inside of blah.txt for the result of test and test. So that's all we had to do there on tr, and that allows us to translate those items for us. Now the only other option we have on there is unique, and what that does is it omits repeated lines. So for example, let's create a new file. We'll say vi unique.txt. Let's insert blah 3 times, and I'm just going to yank it and then hit 3P to paste it. So we now have it 4 times. I'm going to hit O to append underneath it. We're going to do test. I'm going to yank it. I'm going to do 3P to do that 3 more times. So we have 6 lines of code, or 8 lines of code actually, or not lines of code, but we have 8 lines inside of this file. We can actually use the nl command, unique.txt, and it'll count the lines for us. And cat-n unique.txt will also count the lines for us, so we know that I have 8 lines inside of there. Those are 2 things you will need to know, so remember that. And now let's just go ahead and do a cat unique.text, and let's pipe it through the unique command. And so we only are going to show the unique lines. Well, there's 8 lines, however, there's only 2 unique words in there, so now we show those 2 unique lines. Okay, now we have another one that we can look at, and that's going to be the fmt command. We already just took a look at the nl command for numbering lines of files. Well, man nl, and again, that's number lines of files. That's rather simple for us. Now let's take a man at the fmt command. And it's a simple optimal text format that we have different options here to change the width on the page, to change the spacing, to split long lines. It's something that you might want to use only when you're trying to print. You don't necessarily need to do it on your regular shell, but it's a command you might use when you're trying to print something. So there's nothing really spectacular about it. If we were to just type it in here, as you can tell, it just formats it into a nice pretty line for us. Now we can pass it a few other flags, again, to change the margins, to change the headers in order to print it. But we're not going to work on that because printing isn't a huge deal for us right now. So just know that the fm command allows you to change the format of the output. And so that's your lesson on manipulating some files. Go ahead and move on to your next lesson. If you have any questions, go to support and help as always, and we'll do your best, or do our best, to help you move forward. All right, we'll see you at the next lesson.